Good morning. It's Web Wednesdays, and we are going to be covering some Node, which I'm super stoked about because I feel like everyone should know some Node.
Yeah, Node is amazing. It's an amazing tool.
A little bit more Node in your life is never a bad thing. I'm Stacey Mulcahy. I'm a technical evangelist. Feel free to cue a little laughter in the background there. I wish we had a laugh track. I think I need one of those. I'm from New York, and so there you go. and today I am with
Rami Sayar from Montreal.
Oh, Canadian jokes.
Yeah, Canadian. Montreal's in that French province. You can get your own stereotypes, but
yeah, but the whole thing is that we have two Canadians teaching
that's
you
right.
Node. I'm just displaced. I got the Brooklyn attitude by proxy from living there for a bit. So today we're going to talk about building apps with Node.js, and we're going to cover a bunch of things, in terms of working with Node for you. And I'm really excited. We're going to go right from the building blocks into creating kind of like a chat application. So we're going to cover front end, we're going to do some back end, we're going to cover some Azure, Node, Express, all those kind of keywords that you hear. And we're going to be just pretty much delving right into it. So we're going to go over a couple of things about just Node, and we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. And the next thing you know, we're going to be right into the code and right into the demos. So This is me, Stacey Mulcahy, technical evangelist, like I said, out of New York. I focus mostly on HTML5, JavaScript, IoT, sometimes design and UX. Interview designers and developers. You can see some of the stuff I do on Channel 9. I talk a lot about marketing, and I have a whole new IoT series on Channel 9.
My name is Rami. I focus on the web, HTML5, JavaScript, Node, IE11, and I'm based out of Montreal, so I spend most of my time helping startups and developers over there. I sit in the Notman House, so if you're ever in town and you want to check out the really cool startup hub, definitely come to the Notman House. I'm writing a little book on startup culture, seeing as I'm always among them, and I used to work at a startup, and I love startup culture, so if you're interested, make sure you follow it on Twitter. And I blog on Canadian devs, very Canadian-oriented blog, but we've got some great technical content if you're ever interested in Node or IE or anything.
I like how you qualified that. Very Canadian, but there's technical content. Don't worry, we can handle it. so good. Also, instead of the web, it's got to be the interwebs. From now on, it's just the interwebs today. So a couple of things that we're going to cover today with the Node.js. We're going to go through, and just so you have a sense of the structure of how we're going to follow through on this, we're going to do introduction to Node.js. We're going to do an introduction to the Express framework. And so we're going to explain a lot of the things step by step so you have a really good fundamental understanding, and you can kind of just take it further from there. Then, kind of closing off this morning, it might be afternoon for some of you or even evening, but closing off this big section, we'll be doing building a backend with Socket.io and Mongo. And so we're going to show you a little bit about how you work with Mongo, the beauty of Socket.io. I say the beauty because once you kind of know it, it's one of those things you just want to use for everything. Creating a user interface, connecting the front end and back end, and then debugging and deploying on Azure. And so, it'll take you from the ground up all the way to putting that out for the world to see. So just to set a couple of expectations for our session. Target audience. I don't know what you think, but I'm thinking web developers, web designers. If you have any kind of experience in another kind of server-side language, maybe it's PHP, maybe it's ASP, maybe Python, Ruby, any of those kind of things, Node would be of interest to you. Yeah. If you're an IoT person, Node is definitely of interest to you. We have some suggested prerequisites and supporting material. So you can take a look at those links that are listed there. Once again, there's some books, there's software, all that kind of thing just put into one place for you. So feel free to, grab some of the, grab any of those materials and use them for further reference. And again, you can get 50 MVA points for this event. So we have the code that's down there. It's kind of shortened for building apps Node.js, and that expires, November 14th. So, use that code, get an extra 50 MVA points. And, keep learning with the Web Wednesdays. We've got a couple things that are coming up. Next week is going to be mobile apps. The following week we have, I think it's going to be an intro to jQuery, which looks really awesome. And even a couple weeks ago, we had, an intro to Bootstrap. So let's just get started. Let's just dive right in. You know, instead of like talking about stuff, we're just going to get right in there. So introduction to Node.js. We're going to talk about, okay, what is Node? What do you need to know about it? Where is it used? Who uses it? Why should you use it? Why should you consider it? You know, kind of give you that little rationale that you need to get you onto that path of learning it. We're going to talk about setting up your environment, and this is going to be coming from a Windows perspective. You know, once again, just very quickly, some of the things that you need to do to set up your environment. Now, to give you an idea about setting up your environment, we did that just yesterday from scratch, so we can give some good advice on that. You know, your first Node application, just, you know, it's like your Hello World example, and then we're just going to kind of level it up. And then we're going to talk about the Node package manager and just the idea of what it is, how you use it, and, you know, how that becomes part of your tool set when you're working with Node. We have a GitHub repo. We've put all the slides there. We put all of our demo code there. So anything that you need in terms of what we're going to be covering, you can go to this link. You can just download it, clone, whatever you want to do, and you can either follow along or you can get a sense of what those demos are for further reference. All right, if I feel like I'm rushing, it might be all the coffee in my veins, or it might be just, I just want to get to the code. So we're going to talk about Node. What is Node? Like if you had to explain it to someone, how would you explain it?
Node is a way for making web applications using JavaScript. That is the simplest way that I could explain it. It's really about, it's this tool set, these libraries that all come together so that if you're familiar with either JavaScript or some other server-side language, you can pick it up and build web applications that are real-time, that work extremely well with the new latest technologies like WebSockets, and that are generally really high-performant.
So for kind of like an average JavaScript developer who's mostly probably doing front-end stuff, let's say, you know, maybe they're familiar with jQuery or they're familiar with some of those libraries, you know, suddenly now they can now put a whole nother kind of set of technologies in their tool set because they can leverage what they already know.
Yeah, if you guys already know JavaScript, then it's great because with JavaScript you can build the back end to your front end. And what's really cool as well is that you can also share some of this code. So if you've built these data models for your front end, you can literally copy the code onto your back end and use the same code and have one code base for that type of stuff.
So, you know, we talked a little bit about leveraging your current skills in terms of JavaScript now on the server side. And, you know, if you haven't done any server side work and you do have JavaScript knowledge, this is a huge, huge bonus for you. Because suddenly now you can start writing all this stuff on the server side, you know, image resizing, aggregating, social feeds, all that kind of stuff. And it's right there for you to do. And it's very, very approachable. Some other things, I guess, to know about Node that we've kind of mentioned previously or whatnot, still in beta phase, right?
Yeah, it's still in beta phase, but it's actually being used in production across a whole variety of different companies. So it's definitely stable. I believe the reason why it's still in beta phase was simply because they still like to make some changes to the framework. But for the most part, it is very stable, very performant. Lots of companies are using it. We'll show some examples a little later. And what's really cool is that it's all open source, and it was created in 2009, not too long ago. And since then, the community around Node...
2009. That's about 5 years, right?
Yeah, and in 5 years...
Math is hard without caffeine.
Yeah,
but
5 years.
You know.
5 years. But the community has exploded in those 5 years. It's just huge. If you look at any other language, there's very few of them that have grown as fast as Node.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to GitHub, period, the number one in terms of just like languages in repositories is JavaScript, whether or not it's Node related, like server or, you know, front end, it doesn't matter. It's JavaScript. So you can definitely see that trend is just like continuing, right?
Yeah.
So when to kind of use Node, that's always one of those questions of like, when do I use what technology? And so, you know, Node has some really great applications.
Yeah, among them chat applications, which we're going to show you how to make one today. You can build real-time applications, anything that requires a collaborative environment. So let's think of document editing in the cloud, where you have multiple people working on the same document together. And that requires some real-time communication with the server. So if you need to do that, node.js is a great tool for that, especially the way that it's designed with the event loop that we'll cover. And it's really a fantastic framework for building these type of real-time collaborative applications. You can use it for game servers, so if you need some fast, high-performant game server in the backend, something that needs to handle thousands of players at a time, it's definitely a great framework for that. If you're building ad servers, you need to handle thousands of requests a second, another great example for Node. And as well, streaming servers. It's got some really cool tools that will help you stream between different sockets that you're data that you're getting through different sockets. And it's a fantastic tool for that.
Yeah, and those are some of those like more kind of complex, scenarios that we're talking about where, real-time communication is an issue. But, no, it's not just for real-time communication. You could just, instead of running your basic site in PHP, you could just replace it with Node, any of those kind of things.
Yeah.
So it's a nice, you can use it in a variety of ways, and it definitely excels at a lot of these kind of real-time applications that we kind of discussed.
Yeah. You can use it to build the backend for your front-end app. If you're building a single-page application, Node is a great way to do that. If you're a JavaScript developer and you just simply want to create an API for your application in the backend and you don't want to learn a new language, you can definitely use Node for that. It's not just for real-time applications. You can use it for any web-related project. I guess I'd like to ask you, so when maybe Node is not the best tool for the job? Because it seems like the way we've described it, it's like the best tool for everything. But there's a few moments where it's not necessarily the best tool.
What would you say? Like what would be some kind of like warning signs where you're like, maybe Node's not where we should be going?
So the Node is structured to be single-threaded, and there's an event loop that runs. So if you're ever building an application that requires you to do some very long-running calculations in the back end, Node might not be the best tool for that, simply because you will be blocking all the other events that are going to come in. So if you started doing this calculation, the server won't be able to handle any other requests that it gets in the meantime. So for situations where you need to run long-running operations, Node might not be the best tool, but it's great for writing JavaScript code everywhere. It's one of the best tools for that.
So we talked a little bit about like, okay, what is Node? Why you should or shouldn't use it. And when it's one of those things that every time a technology comes out, I say, okay, give me some examples of it in the wild. Like, show me where Node is being used so that I can actually say to my boss or justify to someone else, yes, we should be using this. So we've got some examples listed here. Right.
Microsoft is a big example. We use Node to power Azure mobile services. If you actually are interested in Azure mobile services and you're looking for a backend for your mobile app, you can write that backend in Node. Literally just take your Node scripts and put them on Azure and you're good to go. That's one of the examples. But you've also got companies like Cloud9, the New York Times, and a few other ones as well.
Yeah, that's one of the beauties about learning a little bit of JavaScript is you start to see it being implemented in different places where you didn't expect it. And mobile services was one of them. I was like, oh, hey, I can just go and kind of configure what I want returned back from this, and I can just write it in JavaScript. I don't have to learn something else, So for me, that was like I don't know, it was one of those shining moments where I was like, yes, thank you, And you're starting to see that across the board. More people are starting to use it. JavaScript's being used in very different ways, whether it's on the web, whether it's being used, to create, even native applications, however it's being used.
Yeah. Speaking of native applications, what's really cool is that you can actually use the Azure mobile services with HTML5 apps and with PhoneGap as well. And then you can share the same code that you have in your mobile app with your backend as well. And that's just for the JavaScript developer, you're empowered to do everything that you want with that language. It's like, I've seen and heard of you talk about IoT as well. And that's something that is coming up, JavaScript and the Internet of Things.
Yeah, we're not gonna put it any other way. It's a little pervasive. It's everywhere. And you've got some people who are just not a fan of it. Maybe it's dynamic. I like to say it's like a Play-Doh. You can kind of like mold it into whatever you want it to be because it's so dynamic. You can just add things and there's so many different ways and formats and structures that you can actually code JavaScript. So some people who like more strict typing, that kind of thing, not the biggest fan. But that's why something like TypeScript, for example, is really good for those people who come from more strict typing object-oriented languages.
Yep.
They still have that entry point. So it's one of those things where it's there and it's here to stay, I think, for a while. Yeah. So Node in the wild, our backend in terms of mobile services is a great example. The one really great thing about Node, and we were talking about open source and the rest of it, the community is out of control, right?
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's the Node itself is the third most popular project on GitHub.
Okay, wait, do you know what the first two most popular projects are? If you listed that, I got to ask you.
Okay, well, I believe the first one is Bootstrap.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just don't know what the second one is.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
I can't even guess, but we'll figure that out. Third most popular project. Huge. Yeah.
Over 2 million downloads per month, over 20 million downloads of the last version, the one that we're suggesting you download for this MVA. And the really cool thing, the thing that I like the most about Node is just how much code is already written for you so that you can just pull together.
Yeah.
NPM, the Node package manager, it's the central repository where all of these extensions, these third-party libraries that you can use. And there's 81,000 modules on NPM.
It's like
over 81,000.
There's like a module for everything.
Pretty much.
Like, if you ever think that you need some functionality, don't spend the time like trying to learn and write something from scratch. Always just search, because you'll be really shocked. Like the other day I was doing that. I was like, I really want to know if there's something that's that can handle, I wanted to do like, not just like basic email, but I want to do like the whole kind of crazy inbox stuff. And, is there a library for that? Yeah, sure enough, there's like a library for SMTP, like all those kind of things. So you'd be really surprised. And they're usually well documented and they're usually maintained, which is, one of those big things. Like, it's great to use a module or, a library from someone, but you never know about if it's being maintained or if it's active. And Node seems to feel like the community is really just always active.
Yeah, and if you want to double check if a module is maintained, you could just go to NPM, the website, search that module name, and you can get all these stats about it, how many times it's been uploaded, and all of this information will help you make a good decision on whether this module is the best one.
Yeah, and
for you.
I mean, the other thing too about the community is that there's tons of meetups all over the place. And I mean, I don't know how many of you people out there, use Meetup. I kind of live by it, and it's a really good way to learn new technologies or meet people in different areas. And so for me, I actually, I don't know about you, but I attend a lot of meetups, and I host one in the New York office on Node.js, which I thought they're like, oh, Node.js and Microsoft, this is weird. And I was like, we love Node. And I actually did a whole session on where Node is. And everyone was like, oh, I get it. I totally get it. So it's one of those kind of defining moments where I was like, yes, I've got Node.js meetup in the office. They're going through all these kind of projects, explaining their code, how they built stuff, problems that they had. Best resource. I mean, you can search online, but going in person and just listening to people talk about their process and their projects, one of the best resources.
I definitely have to agree with that. There's lots of meetups in Montreal as well. HTML5 MTL, if you're in Montreal right now, definitely go to sign up for that meetup. You'll get to meet some Node developers there.
Yeah, the one person from Montreal.
The one person. I don't know how many people are from Montreal, so if you're from Montreal, write in the chat room because I want to know. Hopefully you guys are here tonight.
Yeah, you better represent. So we're going to just get kind of right in now that we've talked a little bit about Node, and we're going to talk about setting up your environment. And setting up your environment, this is something that we did literally from scratch yesterday. It was, I think, from start to end. By the time you kind of first of all, starting up your environment, no matter what language you're going with, you always have that kind of setup,
Yeah, there's a little speed bump when you get started. And it took us about 40 minutes to do it from scratch on really
I think it was
machines, but
40 minutes, and we tested everything.
Yeah.
We tested all of our demos. So
yeah.
I think to actually get set up was probably about a half an hour.
Yeah.
And so, just be aware, setting up your environment, number one thing here is read the directions, don't skip the steps. And so I always tend to do that. I'm always like, whatever, and that's how I type too, just like that, just so you know. But I always always, end up like trying to set up my environment. I skip a step, and the next thing I know, I got to go back and start it over from scratch. So, we're going to talk a little bit about just setting up your environment. We're not going to walk through the process necessarily of setting up your environment here. We don't have enough time to go through that, but we have all this stuff kind of documented. So, installing Node on Windows.
Yeah, so the first thing that you want to do is actually get Node. And the place where you need to go is node.js.org. For Windows, you've got two choices. You can use the 64-bit one or the 32-bit one, depending on which version of those is installed on your computer. There's a simple installer. You just follow the wizard and you're good to go. And if you're interested in building it yourself, there's a few links that you can check out as well.
You're a little crazy that way.
Yeah, like some people actually want to do that. They want to try some of the more experimental things.
Yeah.
And definitely, like, if you want to do it yourself, you can. You can compile it for Windows and any of the other operating systems that you're using. One tool that I really like a lot is Chocolatey. And it's this really simple package manager for Windows. So if you're interested in using that to manage most of your developer tools and your installations, it's quite simple. You can go find it online and then just run a very simple command, choco install node.js.install, and it will run the installer for you.
So one thing when you kind of go and you download this and you install, there's a couple things that you need to do after the fact. And one of them is going to be setting your path variable. And you want to be able to do that so that you can just basically open up a command prompt, type Node, and it just automatically knows where to reference where you've downloaded Node, right?
So the installer should do that, but it's always good to double check. Just that way you're not, when you're trying to run Node, you run into issues where it can't find Node. And why don't I show you how to do that, how to double check to see if...
Sure.
In your path variable. And if not, you can check out, well, if you want to check it out later, you can check out this YouTube video as well. But what we'll do is we'll switch over to my screen. And a very simple way to do it on Windows 8.1 is basically to open up the File Explorer. So here I am in a File Explorer. I've got my Node project from GitHub, if in case you haven't downloaded it. And I'm going to right-click on this PC and open a new window. And then what's that going to give me is basically this PC. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Computer tab and go to System Properties, which is going to open the System Control Panel. There's other ways to get to this Control Panel. You can just type in Control Panel into the Start menu, but this is the way that I like to do it. It's the way that I'm used to doing it. But of course, there's different ways. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to go to Advanced System Settings. In there, you'll get this dialog box that pops up. Well, the next step, and the last one, is literally you just click on Environment Variables. When you do that, you've got all the environment variables set for your machine. One of the things that you should double check is the path variable. Now, there's two places where that could be. It could be up in the user variables or in the system variables, depending on your settings. And what you'll want to check is press Edit. If you press Edit, you'll notice you get this really long, this little window with the variable name and the variable path. If you'll notice, Node is correctly included in the path variable value. You can see it right there. I'll stop the highlighting.
That's always my favorite. It's like that long string in a window you got to scroll.
You got to separate it with semicolons, but if it's in there, the minute you open up any command prompt on your system, you should be able to get Node just by typing in Node. The other thing you got to remember is if you've got any command prompts that are already open, you got to restart them.
Yeah, I always forget that personally. I'm always like, why does this not work? And the other thing I think just to quickly note too is that once you kind of go through the install instructions, is that sometimes you'll get like an error, and it's kind of like I don't know if it's like an end of file error or what it is, but it shows up when you're trying to basically update NPM, which is the Node package manager. We'll get into that. And sometimes they'll say, oh, you get this random error, and it'll point to a directory. And it's basically just telling you, hey, that directory doesn't exist and it needs to exist. So you just need to go in and create those folders. And once again, this whole process is pretty well documented. I think we have it in our resources. So you can go ahead and kind of just go through that process and make sure that everything's running and installed. So we're going to kind of just kick right into, your very first Node application. We're going to assume that everything's installed and it's good and it's golden. And we're going to talk about, just running your very first Node application. And so we're going to have a demo here, and it's just going to be a basic Hello World application. I mean, I think that's a standard. I think we're required to do that.
Yep.
I don't think we can, go past and collect 200 unless we do this kind of like basic Hello World application. So why don't we go ahead and
Awesome.
walk through that?
All right, so if you've already cloned the GitHub repo, you can open up this project and follow through with me as well. So once you've got that open, you can go to the Hello World project. You'll find a file named app.js. If you open up this file, this is the code base that I'm showing you. Console.log hello world. If you're coming from a JavaScript front-end background, you'll recognize this. This is literally the only thing that you need to do to get hello world running. Now, let me show you what it looks like. Here I've opened up my command prompt. Hopefully everything is visible. I'm going to go into that directory, and I'm going to type in node app.js. And there we have it. Hello world.
Yeah.
That was fast. One line of code. This is just awesome. I love it when it's just that simple.
It's one of those things like the Hello World application. It's always like that moment where you're like, yes, it's my first time. I've done it. It's awesome. And then it's always like, that feeling afterwards. You're like, that's all it was. Yeah. But simple kind of just getting you used to the idea of running that. And once again, even to kind of go through, we're just console log hello world, but we opened up the console, typed in node, and then you pointed to the file. And I think that's a really important thing. We'll show a little bit maybe in the next demo, but it's important to know that that's how you kind of get node started. That's how you're running it. If you're used to doing anything in other languages, whether it's be Python or PHP, like with the CLI, that kind of thing, where you're just running something off the command line, then it's very, very similar, right? So hello world, you've gotten the first step. So now we're going to just show you one of the more common uses of Node, which is running your server, right?
That's right. So we're going to get back to the demo here, and what we're going to do is we're going to open up the second project, 02 Hello World HTTP. And if you open app.js, you've got something that's a little bit more full. There's more lines of code. There's more stuff going on. But
less white space.
Less white space. Yes, more text on the screen. All right, cool. But it's very straightforward as well. So let's go through it line by line.
Yeah.
And the first thing that you'll notice is you've got this variable HTTP calling this require function. Now we'll get to require a little bit later. It's part of the module loading system. But the next thing that I want to point out too is this variable HTTP contains a function called create server. And what we're going to do next is literally call HTTP create server and pass it a function to handle any requests that it gets and to write the responses as well. That's all you need to do to create an HTTP server. One function call and you've got it. Now, what are we doing with the callback that we've handed to create server? This is a callback, this function right here. What you're going to notice is we're going to use the response variable that's passed into the callback. We're going to write the head, say 200, it's OK, it's good. Pass it the content type. We're going to say text plain because it's not going to be HTML. It's just going to literally be hello world. And we're going to end that response with hello world. Now this function will return a object that we're going to put in our server variable. Mm-hmm. And this object is going to have another function called listen. And the minute that we call listen, that's when our server is going to start running. Okay. And we're going to listen to this port.
Okay. So in terms of, a couple of questions just to walk through this when we go through, server.listen, you have 7,000 here. So if I was to go into the browser and let's say this was running, that would be the port number I'd be looking for, right?
That's right.
By default, what is a port number? If you don't do you need to specify something? Is there something by default? So
ideally, you should be specifying the port that you're running on. Now, if you don't specify one, I believe the default is 80, and that's the port that your browser uses, the default HTTP port. But on some machines, you can't actually run things unless you're in the administrator mode.
Yep.
So we like to use a sort of port that we use for debugging purposes. So in my case, I chose 7000. It's completely arbitrary.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if you search online, you'll find a list of commonly used ports and which applications